The opening scene introduces Kyle, a student at Buxton Academy High School. He goes through his morning routine before delivering a speech at school about vanity and wealth. As a good-looking and wealthy guy, he bullies less attractive students to cheers from most of the audience, though some remain unconvinced. Kyle is vying for the position of Green Comedy president, boasting about his wealth, looks, and being the son of a popular news anchor. Meanwhile, Kendra, a girl with a face tattoo, is present but leaves angrily during Kyle's speech. Unbeknownst to Kyle, Kendra is a witch. After the speech, Kyle finds his posters vandalized, and Kendra boldly confesses to it before walking away. Kyle then encounters Lindy, whom he mistakenly believes is associated with Kendra. However, Lindy clarifies she has no connection to Kendra and doesn't want anyone speaking for her. Despite their brief interaction, they part ways amicably, hinting at a possible crush from Lindy, even though Kyle hasn't spoken to her in 3 years. Later that night, Kyle has a routine and distant conversation with his father, David, indicating their strained relationship and David's busy schedule. In the same room as his father, Kyle texts him about the election results, but David, consumed with his own thoughts, barely acknowledges his son before walking away. Shortly after, the housemaid, Zolo, tries to engage Kyle in conversation, but he responds disrespectfully. Despite his behavior, Zolo remains unaffected and leaves with a smile. The following day, Kyle triumphs in the election, receiving applause as he becomes president. He approaches Kendra, who isn't pleased with his victory. To make amends, he offers her a VIP party ticket, which she reluctantly accepts. That evening, preparing for the party, Kyle carries a white rose and encounters Lindy, working as a waitress. They exchange brief words, and Kyle learns about Lindy's savings for a trip to Machu Picchu. She mentions leaving after her shift, skipping the main event. They also take photos for the school newspaper while discussing the significance of the white rose. Later, Kendra arrives at the party to meet Kyle, but he humiliates her in front of everyone. However, it turns out Kyle's public bullying of Kendra was part of a deceitful act. Kendra, furious at his actions, reveals her witchcraft by cursing him, causing Kyle to feel increasingly uneasy and dizzy. He abruptly leaves the party, returning home. Upon arriving, he discovers Kendra on his balcony, where she elaborates on the curse. She transforms him into a bald, unattractive person, giving him a year to find someone who genuinely loves him. She also tells him that the spell will only break when someone confesses love for him. Kyle is horrified to see his disfigured face and the marks all over his body. Later that night, Kyle's father, David, returns home and is shocked by his son's appearance. He rushes Kyle to the doctor for treatment, claiming Kyle would rather die than look this way. However, the doctor can't help. David, desperate, tells the doctor he's willing to risk everything. Kyle, misunderstanding, storms out, thinking his father means to risk his life too. A few days later, David moves Kyle far from the city to live alone, spreading word that Kyle's in rehab. Zolo stays to care for Kyle initially. Kyle wanders the empty house, seemingly bored. One day, a tutor named Will, hired by David, visits Kyle. Kyle rejects his services until he discovers that Will is blind. Intrigued, Kyle lets him in and vents about his father. That night, Kyle, in depression, stares at his father's picture when Zolo enters. For the first time, Kyle talks pleasantly to her, asking about her family. Zolo shares about her 3 children in Jamaica, expressing her sadness at being unable to see them. She advises Kyle to be patient, assuring him that David will visit. However, Kyle doubts it and leaves a voicemail asking his father not to pretend to visit. He rides his new motorcycle to town, ending up at a party, possibly organized by a friend. Inside, he encounters Kendra, apologizing and pleading for her to make him normal. She ignores him, and moments later, he witnesses his best friend kissing his girlfriend, breaking his heart. Lindy approaches him, discussing romance, unaware that she's talking to Kyle. They share mutual grief. The next morning, Kyle wakes on the floor to find his blind tutor playing darts. They briefly converse, and Kyle expresses disappointment in realizing his friends are fake. Reflecting on happier times, he stares at a photo of himself with Lindy. At night, he walks out, secretly watching Lindy through her window, initiating a pattern of stalking her. Gradually, it becomes apparent that Kyle is drawn to Lindy. During a meal, he contemplates helping his blind tutor regain sight, but the tutor believes it's impossible. Kyle then mentions going out with a girl the night before, bringing happiness to Zolo and Will, who celebrate with a rooftop golf game upon hearing the good news. Kyle, once again visiting Lindy, notices two menacing figures holding Lindy's father at gunpoint. Acting swiftly, he confronts one, disarming him and rescuing Lindy's father. However, in the chaos, the other thug shoves Lindy down the stairs, rendering her unconscious. Without hesitation, Kyle carries Lindy to safety. Later, a gunshot echoes, drawing Kyle back to the scene where he finds Lindy's father has shot one of the thugs. The remaining assailant flees, issuing threats of retribution. Seizing the moment, Kyle coerces Lindy's father into allowing her to stay with him for protection. Lindy, upon arrival at Kyle's house, is understandably upset at her father's decision to leave her in a stranger's care. Kyle, assuming a false identity as Hunter, attempts to win Lindy's favor by showering her with expensive gifts. However, his efforts fall short when Zolo, observant of his actions, reveals that Lindy cannot be won over through material things, advising Kyle to genuinely get to know her. Realizing this, Kyle, wearing a ski mask to obscure his identity, offers Lindy her favorite sweets, a detail he learned from observing her. Lindy, initially wary, questions her situation but finds solace in Kyle's explanation that her father's actions stemmed from love and concern for her safety. Grateful, Lindy accepts Kyle's gesture. Subsequently, Kyle's feelings for Lindy deepen. One evening, as Kyle sits in the living room, the marks on his right arm illuminate with vibrant colors. Lindy enters, and as they engage in conversation, they bond over translating Korean TV shows. Eventually, Kyle unveils his face, apprehensive about her reaction. To his relief, Lindy's response reassures him, sparking greater affection between them. A few days later, Kyle completes the greenhouse with meticulous care. Inviting Lindy over, he impresses her with its beauty. Their first tutor class unfolds amidst the serene setting of vibrant flowers. Before their study session, Kyle delights her with the same coffee she admires. However, their class gets interrupted as Will and Zolo leave them alone, leading them to read poems together amidst the changing seasons within the greenhouse. In the next scene, Kyle pleads with Kendra for more time to break the spell, but she staunchly refuses. Yet, she agrees to aid Will in regaining his sight. Later, Kyle visits Lindy's room and is surprised to find a picture of them together. Engaging in conversation, Lindy expresses an unwitting admiration for Kyle, sensing something remarkable about him. Following this, he invites her on a late-night walk to the zoo, where they share intimate whispers and bond even further. Kyle then takes her to a meaningful spot, divulging his past experiences, recounting moments spent at the zoo with his father, and revealing his mother's sudden departure. As the night progresses, they sit together on the roof, waiting for the sunrise after spending the night in each other's company. Lindy rests her head on Kyle's lap and drifts into sleep, feeling an inexplicable connection with him. Gently carrying her to her room, Kyle tucks her into bed, noticing a notification on her computer revealing her intention to flee to Machu Picchu with another person. Determined to persuade her otherwise, Kyle redirects their path to his father's lavish mansion. During their journey, Lindy receives a text from her father, urging her to return as the troublemaker has been apprehended. At the mansion, they share intimate moments, with Lindy opening up about her past. Later, while walking by the lake, their near kiss is interrupted by a call informing Lindy of her father's hospitalization, prompting her swift departure. Before leaving, Lindy appreciates Kyle as a good friend, unintentionally causing him pain as he yearned for more. En route to the hospital, she reads letters Kyle had given her, discovering his growing feelings for her. When Lindy's father recovers, she tries to contact Kyle, but his hurt feelings prevent him from responding. As Lindy prepares for her trip to Machu Picchu, Zolo and will encourage Kyle to meet her before she leaves. Despite the scrutiny due to his appearance, Kyle approaches Lindy at school. When questioned about his lack of response, he confesses his fear of not being loved, openly declaring his affection for her in front of others. Moved, Lindy kisses him but refrains from saying "I love you," leaving the spell intact. Respectfully, Kyle encourages her to enjoy the trip. Moments later, Kyle notices his reflection, realizing he has returned to his original form. As Lindy searches for Hunter, she encounters Kyle, puzzled when his phone rings. It dawns on her that Kyle and Hunter are the same person, leading to a kiss after the realization sinks in.